able to actually make those fans feel like they're supporting like a really, like their small community club is really legitimate. Like they're playing in the Premier League, they have a real serious stadium, the kits are really fire, and they can wear them as fashion pieces, and they're like priced as per they should be priced in Ghana, not as if they're priced in America. So they're accessible, they're good quality. And it's just something they would never normally have as like a symbol of pride for their community.
Absolutely.
I think that's like a different kind of cool.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Because Football. It's your host, Andrew, and I'm here with Jonny Hopcroft from Icarus. He's wearer of many hats, head of the UK office, head of manufacturing, just many things as being part of being the startup that Icarus is. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of his personal football journey and kind of what Icarus is able to offer to the football world and culture, and of course touch on some of his support of Fulham FC and some of the American connections there. So I guess first of all, Jonny, thank you so much for joining us here on Because Football.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew, for the intro. I've been looking forward to this. It's my first ever podcast appearance, which is exciting.
Awesome.
And yeah, I'm excited to get into some of these questions. Always happy to chat football, especially happy to chat Fulham. So it should be good chat.
Awesome. Yeah, so Jonny and I had met at the United Soccer Coaches Convention this past January in Philadelphia. And I had known about Icarus for a while. It is more of a on the US side of Philadelphia based company, correct?
Yes. The company was founded in Philly. And then we also have a regional office here in London.
Right. Yep. So I'd kind of, for whatever reasons, I've had Icarus on the radar, have a nice, as I told you guys, I have a nice, like the unofficial Brendan Aronson sort of Red Bull Salzburg, officially approved, whatever it was, but really nice shirt that I have myself, and I've gotten like Icarus kits for a lot of friends as gifts and things like that, and just always have been following you guys. So it was great to finally meet and connect, and just instantly be able to kind of swap passion and interest in not only just the game itself, but a lot of, I think, the off the beaten path, maybe the more niche, not always just the big glitzy stories and clubs and teams of like the World Cup and the Champions League and the top tiers of the footballing world, but everything else in between, and there is so much in between. So it's really great to connect. But yeah, I guess first thing is like, tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what kind of has brought you to this point, and a little bit of as far as you're getting connected with Icarus, or kind of what led up to this point.
Yeah, it's like a pretty, I'll say, fortuitous journey, really. I grew up in the UK, just outside of London, in a town called Weybridge. I would say I've always been a massive football fan, but that's actually not totally true. And I didn't really start liking football until I was about, 12 or 11, which sounds pretty young, I think, in America, but in England, that's like very old.
Yeah, it's like, what's wrong with you? Like, yeah, what have you been doing?
Yeah. I was like, I didn't really dig it that much as a kid. And it's strange when I look back on it, because I went, my whole family went to games. Like my mum, probably the biggest football fan in the family, she grew up all around the UK. As a kid, went to Southampton games, which back then, there weren't many young girls going to these football matches,
right?
In the 70s or whatnot. So I think it gets a lot of passion. Like my dad, again, they were at the Wimbledon '89 Cup final, was very into football. My brother was very into it. My sister less so, but I guess it took me a while. But then when I was about 12, I think maybe in an attempt to get me into football, I started going to Woking FC games. Which was a local, I think at that time, National League South club. They're actually they're in the same division as Wrexham now. So it's playoffs. I think they've got a game together. It's pretty big. But
to just pause you real quick then, for many listeners who aren't totally familiar with the English football pyramid, maybe a bit more so now because of Wrexham and everything there. But so what would that National Premier League, would that be the fifth division?
That would be the sixth division. So Wrexham are now in the fifth, just promoted to the fourth. Working now in the fifth, and may get promoted with Wrexham. So I went to a season on league football, and I think that just really got me into it. Kind of gave me the bug, because it's so close to the pitch. It's everyone there is so attuned to the game. It's very old school. Like, half time, I remember they had a star striker when I was watching Giuseppe Sol, who was English but Italian born. And it's like at half time, like his mum, like his actual mother, would come around at half time with a bucket to collect donations for like the local charity. And it's just like the star striker who scored like 100 goals for Woking. So I just found that like very charming, and that really got me into watching football as a whole. And around the same time, Fulham, I think that was the season after that. My brother was a Fulham fan for context as well, but at that point I got into watching Fulham. And so then the Europa League season in 09-10, I started watching games with my brother. And if anything's going to get you into football, it's like that, watching the Fulham Europa League season, because it was just so many incredible games. And it's almost, I look back on it with like a sense of like real sadness now that I watched that. And that was how I got into supporting Fulham that season. Because I'm like,
at
that
the peak,
it
was like all downhill, right?
It's
after that,
it's never going to get like, never going to get. And also like, obviously the matches meant something, like you cared about it, but I didn't care about it in the same way I would have cared about it if that happened now. So it's like, it's a bit of sweetness to it, but it was what really gave me the bug for Fulham as well. And from there, it just kind of like became a growing obsession. We started going as a family, going to Fulham. The next season, we got season tickets as a family, and I've gone every season since then. So it's about 12, 13 years now. So I've seen a lot of good football, seen a lot of very bad football.
A bit of up and down. And like you're saying, when your Fulham kind of fandom started, like it wasn't a club that was too familiar with the European stage. Like at that time, it was mostly like, they'd throw their weight around a bit in the Premier League and things, but not quite, against the likes of like Juventus, of course. Like I even remember watching that in the Clint Dempsey chip over Buffon at Craven Cottage. I mean, iconic goal. But what's that kind of been since then? I know Fulham's had a bit of an up and down, and now they are back in the Prem, but how would you describe those 12, 13 years of seeing everything up close at Craven Cottage?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think I'm almost in hindsight glad that Fulham got relegated, because it gave me a totally new view of supporting football as like a middling, really bad EFL club. There was some pretty, especially in the first two seasons after we got relegated, like 2014 to 2016, the Kit Simons managerial era. Like you look back on those teams and they're insane. Like you have like a mixture of like Dan Burn, who's obviously killing it right now in Newcastle, but at that time was playing very poorly. Moussa Dembele up top, who was now playing for Lyon,
he's a beast.
Playing for Monaco. You had like Ross McCormack, who was great in Championship, but then you just had like Sean Kavanagh, who was just like left back promoted from the youth team, who is now retired, I think, at a pretty young age, unfortunately. But he was playing in centre midfield with like Tim Hooglands, this German right back from the German second division, also in midfield. You just in the Championship, you just get very strange teams. So you end up with players who are like actually very talented, who go on to big things, and players who aren't so good. And that there's so much turnover, it's so unpredictable. So I think those seasons were very enjoyable, just for the unpredictability about it. And also during that time, like the 4 years before we initially got promoted to the Premier League, the Premier League just completely changed. Because like when Fulham got relegated in 2014, like the Premier League was, it was glitzy and there was a lot of money in it. But it wasn't the like City Liverpool era, like every team can spend £50 million on a player era Premier League that it is today. And so it was like interesting to see like that change while Fulham was in the second division. And then like how, as a result, importance it became to get promoted and all that. But it's been, on the whole, it's been pretty good. A lot of promotions, a lot of good games. I've gone to a lot of good ones. Been able to go, very fortunate to go to a lot of games this season. So I'm looking forward to the Villa game. We still have an outside chance to Europa League, so I'm looking forward to the Villa game tonight. Yeah,
and at least like and would you say as a supporters, like first you're just kind of always just counting up the points to safety to making sure you're not going, and then it's like after that, or do you think as Fulham fans you guys allow yourself to dream a little bit and say, hey, this might be a year, and maybe open yourselves up a little bit to whatever the season might bring?
I mean, I would say I'm always pretty totally deluded every season. Like midway through this season, I was texting my brother saying, like, I'm pretty sure we can get Champions League this season. Like, 3 points off Newcastle, win this game, win that game, and then 2 games later, you're like, Mitrovic isn't banned for a season, your hopes are totally extinguished. But yeah, I would say I lean towards the more deluded side.
Gotcha.
My parents probably lean towards the more realistic side.
Okay, gotcha. They're the anchor weighing you down a little bit there.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so speaking of Fulham, like it's a club that's always really stuck out to me because probably around similar times when I started really following, as a kid, I followed all the American sports, and then all of a sudden, I guess I was like 12 or 13, and those all just fell away, and it was like just soccer, and started watching the Premier League and just like, Bundesliga and La Liga, like tons of things. That was more of like the Ronaldinho era, and then like Ronaldo kind of getting started and things at United. But of course, like Fulham has always had this connection with the US, so it always stuck out. So it was easy to see like Carlos Bocanegra and Brian McBride, and then like Dempsey. So it's been really interesting to see that. And then like to today as well, there's kind of been that. So it's kind of interesting. I can't really think of another club in England that kind of has that same depth of connection to the US. Is that something that, you guys as like English UK like fans of Fulham are kind of aware of having that and know that relationship? Or is it like, oh yeah, they've just been, one of many foreign players that come through the club?
No, totally. I think, Fulhamerica is a phrase, and we've had so many. I mean, even like the ones you haven't worked out, like Eddie Johnson.
That's right, Eddie Johnson.
I'm trying to remember off the top of my head.
I think Casey Keller, was he? Did I have that right? Casey?
Bocanegra, McBride. It's been like a long, steady relationship. And also the fact we've had like Dempsey and Tim Ream, who, in my opinion, are sent us to bed on Sunday. And for context, my flatmate and also works at Icarus. But I'm absolutely convinced that Tim Ream right now is playing at a higher level than any American player ever has done. Wow. I feel empowered to say that because I saw Dempsey at his peak. I think Dempsey would potentially lay claim to that, that 2012-13 season. If not, and just the things that Ream has done over like not just this season, but just like last season as well, it's been so consistently excellent at a time when the Premier League now is at a higher level than any football has ever been. And he's just making it look effortlessly easy. So I think it's also been strengthened by the fact that we've had like incredibly good players. Like Ream has played at this point like 250, 300 games for them. So he's
been with them for a while, and it seems like even just the last couple years, the last 2 years really, and like get his form, playing himself back into the World Cup as well. It seems like his career, he's just continued to get better with age as well. Like it just keeps 100%. Going and going.
100%. And I've got a lot of respect for him because he had some awful seasons in the Premier League. But I feel like the season when we first went up, it often gets totally, in my opinion, mischaracterized. At the one where we signed like 100 million and bought Seri and Anguissa, and we were terrible. With Slavica Kalavic, I think people look at that and say, "Oh, what a waste of money! That whole season's a failure. Ream was terrible." But actually, like Ream, the season before, won Player of the Season for Fulham in the Championship, and was our best player, but was playing at such.
And Fulham like trotted to like winning the championship as well, right? They like
I think
this
is like a couple of seasons ago. Yeah, this is the playoffs, but we finished third and had we won 23 games unbeaten.
Okay.
We're really, really strong. And he was player of the season, and he goes into the next season, and he gets injured, I think, before the season. So he missed the first 5 games. Tom Cairney, who was a captain, also best player, also gets injured, missed the first 2 games. Mitrovic is injured, and then by the time he gets back into the team, the team is already like we just lost the 3 best players from the previous season. And so the whole thing kind of like falls. The manager gets sacked. And so I kind of feel like despite the fact that everyone's like, oh, Tim Ream has really raised his level, which he has, no doubt. I think he was pretty harshly judged, despite the fact he's had like pretty incredible seasons in previous seasons. So I just want to give a quick Tim Ream shout out, I think.
Okay, giving him credit that maybe the critics were a bit too loud early on, and now they're just maybe not necessarily to his level has raised that much, but they're just seeing through his consistency and things, and that he's maybe not necessarily turned it around, but people are just starting to pay attention a bit. No, it's good to see. I think it's cool. It was something for me, like when my friends and I were interested, like, I would watch Fulham and wanted them to do well, but a couple friends like were really into, got the kits, like had the McBride jersey or the Dempsey jersey and everything. And it was like, that's so important to see, like to have those connections to kind of build that interest in the game. And now I think the current generation of kids are a bit spoiled. I guess now we've got a similar thing going on at Leeds as far as like for American supporters with Aronson, with McKinney, with Adams. But I think, at the time it was still like, not super common to see a lot of, Yanks abroad, especially in the Prem. And I think so. It's important, like for me on the cultural side, again, being interested in growing the passion for the game and being in touch with that younger generation, like to see kids like this. And I'm sure there's, kids who watch this past World Cup who are center backs and want to play like Tim Ream, and now they're going to be Fulham supporters, right? Or the outside back, like want to be like Anthony Robinson. And I think it's really, really, really cool to see that. So it's great to see their success.
Totally. Yeah, very, very, very happy for him. But yeah, in terms of just, I kind of derailed that. It's the journey, like how I ended up at Icarus through. I was trying to chat about like working.
I know. I was just about to come back too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess around 2016, so I graduated high school. I ended up studying in the US, in New Jersey, actually coincidentally in the same town that Robbie, who's the founder of Icarus, grew up in.
Okay.
And while at college, I was super into football, obviously. Did not get into the was cut from the club soccer team because I'm not actually that good at football. And decided instead to create like an English style Sunday league team in America. So it was called Wawa United, named because the club was founded while we were at the Wawa after a night out in our town.
It's a great name.
And from there, thank you. We're trying to.
Could you for the many?
A little bit of contact with. Sorry,
okay. Sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say, if you could just back up, just like we had to explain the English football pyramid. And I'd love your fresh eyes on this. If you could describe Wawa for everyone listening.
Yeah, I mean, where do you start? I mean, it's basically a convenience store with a Subway kitchen in it as well. But at least when we were at uni, there's not many places that are open 24/7 in a sleepy suburban town. So if you're looking for a hoagie, if you're looking for a mac and cheese, if you're looking for just some crisps or just something to hang out, Wawa's a pretty good bet for late hours.
There you go. A great name for a club.
Yeah, so the big news is we're actually we have like big college reunions every year, and so this is in a month's time in May. I finally reached out to, I say big Wawa, this is really regional Wawa because it's like medium Wawa and small Wawa is our Wawa United. Reached out to medium-sized Wawa, the local Wawa, and they've agreed to hang one of our shirts in the Wawa.
Love it. Love it.
Having like a big
that's a big moment.
Ceremony.
It's a huge moment. The ribbon, let's go. Yeah, that's proud. Full circle. That's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah, so we're trying to get local press down there and hopefully blow it up enough so we'll reach big Wawa. And it kind of links into Icarus as well, because this is how I actually found Icarus initially, around 2018. We were looking to make a kit based on the Wawa Panini box, which is like, at that point, for people who don't know, have ordered from Wawa, is beige and has a red stripe in the middle, very Boca Juniors style. So this is the concept, cream kit.
Or River Plate. I think you're going to offend our Argentine. River Plate. I think you're
River Plate colors, but in Boca Juniors.
Okay, gotcha.
Style. And so I obviously cannot find many places that would service this request, and somehow came upon Icarus. I think they may have followed us, or somehow initially we encountered each other, and just started chatting to Robbie on the Instagram. And if you look back, I've looked back at it before. We chatted ages. I was probably the most annoying client ever. Because I was just so into this concept that we could design whatever we want and we could actually do this. At this point, Robbie, I think, was still part-time or maybe just gone full-time. Had only had maybe 10, 15 clients. So we were very much test case as well. Anyway, we ended up making the shirts and they were incredible. I loved them. Really, the whole thing was a massive meme as well. So obviously, everyone loved
Absolutely.
it, and it was like just a funny joke when you're called Wawa United and you're playing against teams every Sunday. And then in my last year, along with actually Ben, who's now working at Icarus, he started last week, and is a friend of mine from university. We together set up a soccer conference, which I guess also needs a bit of explaining because we don't have them everywhere. But we basically over the summer realised that Jesse Marsh had gone to Princeton, and we're like, oh, how has this not been known to us in the last 3 years?
Okay.
Because in our minds, like obviously Princeton has a few famous alums, but no one is as famous as Jesse Marsh. Like Jeff Bezos is not Jesse Marsh level of fame if you're a football fan. So I was like, this needs to be common knowledge. So we tried to get him to come and speak to basically do the whole thing as an elaborate scheme to get Jesse Marsh to come speak and meet him. In the end, he was in the season, but through the process of that, we realized actually it's hard, like the Princeton alumni soccer scene is pretty wild. Like you have like Bob Bradley as well, who's like Jesse Marsh's mentor.
Yeah, no, they've been really influential. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like Grant Wall, you know, there was like a bunch of even around like historians like Lauren DeBrois, a historian at Duke who like writes and teaches about football, which is also very niche. Charlie Solitano, who like runs, who used to run the International Champions Cup, and I run the sports group. So we were just like, this is just a crazy collection of people. So we organized this conference and invited Robbie to speak at the conference as well, because we really liked what he was doing. So that was the first time we actually met him in person. You know, got on. The conference was super stressful, so we didn't have that much chance to chat. Fast forward to later that semester, which was like COVID semester. I was doing a business class and I had to write a final presentation of like as a pitch for a startup's like growth plan. So obviously I chose Icarus, and after doing that, I presented it to Robbie. And
doing the hard lifting for him. How could he say no?
Yeah, long interview process, I guess. But it's funny, actually, at that point still, I was actually set to like intern at the ICC, like Charlie Santano's company. But at that point, my friend and also now current flatmate, Jean, emailed Robbie about interning in Icarus because he, again, like, you know, it was COVID, everyone's plans were getting totally ruined. So he was looking for something to do, and then my thing fell through because of COVID as well. I ended up interning as well. Jean is now a lawyer and lives with us, and he went in a very different path, but I very much stuck with Icarus and was like really, really into it. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it happened. It's also how, you know, I was the first employee at that point when I actually got hired at the end of that summer. That's why you had this quite unorthodox structure of the company with, you know, a very firm US base and US presence and US identity, but also me as an Englishman working remotely from London and then being an English company as well. So that's kind of like the origin story. And then from there, it's kind of grown organically.
Very cool. Very cool. And so now what would you say is kind of like the core of what Icarus can offer? Obviously designing, you know, fantastic and super unique and very customized kits. But who would you say is like kind of who you mainly are helping or supporting, or let's say like an average client?
Yeah, I think in terms of an average client, it really varies. Ultimately, we just believe fundamentally, like we hate templates. Like there's no two clubs are the same, so really no two kits should be the same as we see it. So that we kind of think we have value for every club. Obviously, at the very top level, you know, your Arsenals especially, and they get really catered design support from Adidas at this point. And other big clubs do get that, but you know, when you go down to the Championship, most teams are wearing template kits. Actually, in the US, I've probably seen more lowly clubs have custom kits, custom in the sense they're bespoke. Than
I've noticed that trend more. Recently in the US, definitely a lot of clubs going for that because I think it's such a key way to connect with the fan base and to really show the character
and build a fan base.
Identity.
If you're trying to build a club, like trying to build support and get eyeballs and get people to buy into something, it's a really important part of it. And you know, in the UK, you compare UK-US football culture. In the UK, there's like such a long history in conservatism, and you know, people are going to like hate certain football kits if you release them and they're not traditional and conventional. So it's kind of a different problem at play. But yeah, and I think ultimately, given the journey that led me to join Icarus, you know, through Wawa United, like, I would never want Icarus not to be able to service not, I want to say like the smallest, not saying Wawa United was the smallest possible team, but we should never not be working with a team like Wawa United, because I actually think there's more value to a group of 10 friends who that is like their main friend group, and that is what they care most about, like in the world outside of like family, friends, like the big things. Like,
absolutely.
That's like they always say like football's the most important, the least important thing. It's like at that point, what we do matters the most. And if we worked with a Manchester United, for example, like people care about what the kit looks like, but it doesn't mean as much per person as like a really small team who are just like blown away by the fact they get to have like their kit that reflects
that's huge.
And
that's
not
huge.
Something else.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you talked a little bit earlier about like level of engagements, like really creating that connection. And so how have you seen that, like going from just your average Sunday league or just whoever really would want to order X amount? And I remember you guys saying you got a pretty low like minimum order as well. Like, is it 15, 18 kits, something like that, as far as like a minimum number of shirts that would need to be ordered, which is like super accessible?
Yeah, it's just 10 actually. So even
10. Yeah, so it's like, you could have like a 7-a-side team and have your own kits is huge.
Totally. Or even a 5-a-side team with a few subs.
Yeah.
And, we've done like weddings, bachelorette parties.
Love that.
It's pretty accessible.
Yeah. How is that then? How have you seen that go from like just the average, men's team or just a group of friends playing in a pub league to like now actually having some, if you could talk about some like the professional sides in Ghana that you've been working, or Bhutan or some of those places, like kind of how does that kind of change a little bit what you guys are offering, but also still stay true to like your mission and values?
It's a good question. I think ultimately the pure offering is still the same. We're trying to create a kit that resonates with fans in this case, rather than the players of the team. And that people are excited to wear as a fashion piece. The relationship of the deal is very, very different. And working with Sunday League team, there's a lot more that goes into it. Working with international clubs as well is just very, it's in this day and age, especially very tricky with supply chains, shipping, customs, language barriers, different business practices. It can be difficult, but I don't want to say it's more rewarding. So as I said earlier, I think the most rewarding thing is the smallest club possible. But it's more rewarding in a different way because you're offering something to a community that they've never had before. For example, I think Ghana is a really good example of this. Like, you look at FC Samaltex, they're a new club centered around a very small community. It's effectively it's like an industry town. It's a timber company town. So everyone who lives around FC Samaltex town has some association with the timber industry. And so basically the club is funded by the overarching company. And as a result, everyone who it's a community club. Everyone who goes to the games and even plays in the team is very intimately related to this community. I think there's a lot of investment behind it. They've built a beautiful stadium. If you look at it online, like actually made of wood, using like the timber that they make.
Wow.
It's gorgeous. And it's like I think one of the most well-run clubs in the league. And they're probably my favorite Ghanaian kits they've made as well. And so it's really cool to be able to actually make those fans feel like they're supporting like a really, like their small community club is really legitimate. Like they're playing in the Premier League. They have a real serious stadium. The kits are really fire, and they can wear them as fashion pieces, and they're like priced as per they should be priced in Ghana, not as if they're priced in America. So they're accessible, they're good quality. And it's just something they would never normally have as like a symbol of pride for their community.
Absolutely.
I think that's like a different kind of cool, on like a larger scale than just working in a small club. Yeah,
very cool. Especially in a place that has such a core identity, like you said, is everyone's got a really similar lifestyle or is affected by the same things, which in many places is like, not the case. We tend to, I feel like as certain regions do have their own character, but things are changing as the world changes. And that's where kind of like that club or that connection that you have kind of comes into place. Like going back to what you said when you got into football with Woking, like just that feeling, it sounded like from what you said, it's that feeling of being connected, of sure, like you had other options for football around you, right? Anywhere you look, but like it was just having that feeling of engagement, of like you were really a part of something, being close and like kind of feeling everything. And that, that is absolutely like embodied and kind of brought out through the shirt you're wearing. And for maybe, or what do you know if somebody's, based on their responses, of like, hey, this could be a good fit, versus like somebody's just looking maybe for another supplier to come in and be able to sponsor everything or operate differently? Like, what do you guys kind of look for that really resonates with you?
I think it's about trying to manage the club in what we see as like a really honest and in a way that I think is in the interest of the community of fans. And I think that of the clubs that we work with in Ghana, I mean, especially Bibiani Gold Stars, I think especially FC Smartex, and also in the case of Dempsey City, that's very apparent. And like other people that we work with from those clubs, I think are very, very easy to work with, very honest. Yes, I mean that's a big part of it. I think also like we would work with any clubs. I don't think there's any clubs that we wouldn't work with. Pretty much, like with maybe a few exceptions. I don't want to sign that away. I'm sure there are some clubs we wouldn't work with, but on the whole, we would work. We want to work with any clubs. I think that there is a unique story behind every team. There's a unique story between everyone who's at the game, and like especially in somewhere like Ghana, where I've never been. You learn a lot of really interesting things from chatting to people. Same with Bhutan, that you would not learn otherwise. I think even if it was a club that came to us that ostensibly has no social media, very little information about it, it would still strike our interest because there is something to be learned and something to be enjoyed about working with them and value that we can offer them. In short, it's kind of two different questions. How do we look for clubs? I think it's more based around what is available upon our network of like friends in these different countries who are interested in Icarus as well.
A lot of personal relationships.
A lot of personal relationships. You can't just go online and find the right person to chat to these clubs. It's a lot of it's a lot of suggestions, recommendations, word of mouth. And then in terms of wherever we work that club, it really comes down to like economics. Like, can we work out? Because often if you work for clubs in Ghana, it's a wildly different economic situations for clubs in the US. And, we don't want to lose money at the end of the day from working with these clubs, because interested we are as a business. So it's about how do we, ensure that they are getting the best deal possible for their club, because, we're cognizant of the fact that, they're less well off as a community than we are in Philadelphia or London. We don't want to rip them off. We don't want to extract money from fans going to the games there. Ultimately, we just want to break even because we think it's a cool thing to do, and we want to work with those clubs and tell their stories because we think it promotes. Like, the ideology sounds a bit too grand, but like the vision of what we want to be as a brand, which is working with
absolutely
clubs in different communities and giving them something that they don't necessarily get otherwise. So that it can take a little back and forth to work out whether that is possible, because sometimes it just fundamentally isn't possible. If the average purchase of a shirt in a certain country is $4, and that's more than it costs for us to make it, like, there's no way that we can reconcile that and try to strike a partnership. But we do our best to try and make it work if there is interest in both sides.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, very cool. And so you mentioned kind of you learn a lot about those communities, those areas. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Give us one fun fact that you've learned about Ghana and or Bhutan. I think for most people, they're thinking like, what is Bhutan? It's a very small, as I understand, a very small nation in the mountains of the Himalayas, I believe, kind of wedged up in that, around India, China area. So, but yeah, what fun facts do you have to share with us?
That's a good question. So I know a lot more about Ghana just because we've worked with so many clubs there for so long. We had a really good chat with the grandson of the founder of the Cape Coast Mysterious Dwarves about a year ago, current son of the current chairman, who Samuel Butler was also the chairman of the Ghana NFA for about 10 years as well. Like very high up within Ghanaian football. And he just saw so many these are more anecdotes than fun facts, but just like apparently at a game, like when they went to a game as a kid, as an act of intimidation, the opposition like boardroom effectively did not let his father, who was the president of the Football Association, into the stadium as a way, because they thought by not letting him into the stadium, it would just like kind of embarrass the team and result in lack of motivation or loss of pride or loss of faith that would then like negatively impact, because there's a lot of like superstition around these games. And kind of like trying to like
set you off a little bit, put you off your game. Yeah.
And so he told this great story about how like, so then which is not common at that point, this must have been like mid-2000s, early 2000s, for like the owner of these clubs to like basically sit with the fans who are like standing on a hill over the stadium, so they don't buy tickets. Yeah. So it's just like you come out of the Brentford Stadium now, you have those flats, like that same kind of thing. So you just sort of like him out with his whole family, like went and just like sat with like the community of like Cape Coast fans who had travelled, and they like all like lifted like the chairman on their shoulders and like dancing around and won, and it was like a galvanizing.
Like, we don't need your stinking. Yeah, exactly. Like, exactly. We don't need your stinking boardroom. Like,
we'll stay here and we'll win anyway. So that was a pretty cool story. We also asked, like everyone always asks, like, the Cape Coast Mysterious Dwarves is a crazy name for someone born in England, like where did that come from? So you're like, what is the origin of that name? And we didn't get a straight answer, because he was like, ultimately no one actually knows. But there was a few theories. One, because it's also an interesting history. The Cape Coast Mysterious Dwarves was set up as an anti-colonial team. It was one of the first clubs set up in Ghana when it was under British control.
And again, that is the Cape Coast Mysterious Dwarves, right? Just making sure we get that right there. Cape Coast Mysterious Dwarves. Exactly. Makes sense that the origin itself is mysterious. Otherwise, it'd be the straightforward, obvious dwarves, and that just doesn't have the same ring.
Quite right. So it's founded in like the 40s, I think, maybe 50s, 30s, as a team of like local Ghanaians who wanted to create a football team, and at that point it was only like white British, like colonial officers, residents, whatever you want to call it, in the area playing football. So they basically created this team as a way of, wanting to play football, and they wanted to challenge like the white colonizers to a match of football at the end of it. And so there's two competing theories as to what's mysterious. Three, actually. One is that the people at that time were just smaller than the white British team, so that's where the dwarf name came in.
The
mysterious element is kind of uncertain. He also mentioned it could be because in local religion there is this character who is roughly translated as a mysterious dwarf. He's like he's more like an elf, or like some sort of like magical character who like steals things, a little bit like the Tooth Fairy, like. And so the idea is that you're like pickpocketing 3 points, or like on the side, like so you're just going around like
3 points all over the league. Gotcha. I like that theory.
Yeah, I think it's just those two theories. I lean towards the second theory, and maybe in a combination of the two.
And talk about a psychological advantage. I mean, if you've got a team that is embodying this like mythical creature, coming against you, you're going to be thinking it's not just 11 men, it's 11 men and a mysterious dwarf about to steal 3 points.
Exactly.
So
ready to take your points.
Love that.
You got no chance. Trying to give any other things we've gone in.
I don't think, and we come back, we were talking before about, not necessarily comparing with the bigger clubs, but just saying what this has to offer. I don't think you could find a club in the Premier League or the Champions League that has quite as interesting or mysterious of an origin story, at least for a name, right?
100%.
I'm sure they are there. There's a lot of uniqueness, but exactly.
Yeah. No, they're really. I love as well. I mean, one of the reasons we were attracted to Cape Coast Dwarves in the first place was we saw they had a Japanese striker. And we were basically like, how on earth?
Yeah, I've seen some posts about that. Yeah, he seems to be a bit of a mini celebrity as well.
It was funny because there were 2 foreign players in the league when we started working in clubs in Ghana, Jindo and a player called Fabio Gama, who are friends. It was just like Fabio Gama is this Brazilian number 10 with like an afro. So obviously everyone in the league is like, this guy is the best player, like the most skillful player. Cause like a Brazilian number, you don't get more saucy than a Brazilian number 10 in like international football. Like it doesn't get better. So I think he had like especially a cult celebrity status around him. He also went to the biggest team in the country and was ostensibly also one of the best players in the league.
Sure.
And they won the league. He's now playing in the Bahraini league, which seems like a good move for him as well. Financially speaking.
Yeah,
we were just like catching up a story about how a Japanese striker ended up playing straight in Ghana. So we've done that. I think we did an article as well. You can find Jindo's story online, but that's he moved around a lot as a kid, and he lived in Holland for a bit, and he studied abroad. And at some point, he was in Japanese youth academies. He was a good player growing up, and at some point, he just wanted to like try and basically try and explain his football career didn't pan out in certain places, or just explore where we could make a career in different places.
Right.
So he went to Tanzania. And basically connected with people and ended up traveling to Africa to find a club. And then ended up in Cape Coast when they saw the value in him. He ended up being the first Japanese, I think Asian player in general to play in the Ghanaian leagues, which is
trailblazing. Cool yeah, it's amazing. Again, and those are like connections and different relationships and just experiences just because of the game. It's like there would be probably not too many other reasons for that to happen, or I can't, I don't know too much about international relations between Japan and Ghana, but it wouldn't be the first thing you think of. And again, just shows like kind of what the game has to offer. Just a really awesome story. So definitely look forward to seeing more of that. And so yeah, I guess like if we kind of carried on with that theme too, we talked about some of your experiences and then with Icarus as well. Like, what do you think if you had to kind of complete that sentence, because football ... like how do you think you would finish that sentence, Johnny?
So I think I would finish it as like, because football is one of the few collective in-person communal events that we have left, I think, in the world. Like for me, football is all about the in-person experience. It's all about however many people, whether it's 100 around the stadium with no seats or 90,000 at Wembley, just being so engrossed in what is happening in like a collective way. I think, I love going to concerts for a similar reason, but you don't find many spaces in the world anymore where people are paying attention to like in-person, live, community-based events in the same way anymore.
Yeah.
I think that's really special because that's also why I like the English football atmosphere. And this is a little bit maybe nationalistic for me to say this. I prefer English atmospheres to like Southern American atmospheres because which always often everyone's like, Boca Juniors are going to play craziest game of all time. And don't get me wrong, like it is way crazier than a game of college. I'm not going to defend that. But there's something so reactionary about how English football crowds are as a crowd. Like if the game is bad, like, it's pretty quiet, and if the game is annoying, like the crowd's getting on the players' back. There's a very strong relationship between the game that's happening and the fans that are watching. Whereas if you watch games with quote unquote like legendary atmospheres, I've been to a couple of them. It is really cool for a totally different reason. It's like carnival acts, and everyone's like having a good time, but everyone's kind of just doing the same thing
constantly.
It's constant energy, even if the game is absolutely terrible. And I kind of like that relationship where it's like you have this like game happening and you've got like tons of people like really feeling it. And yeah, I think that's just really special because I don't think there's many examples of that. Like I think of my friends who don't go to football matches. I'm like, when was the last time you were in a group of 50,000 people paying attention to one thing? Probably a long time ago.
Yeah, it's something that's hard to explain, and I think I was just thinking of this the other day, like, especially in England, I think the one thing as an outside observer that sticks out is just like, and a lot of footballing cultures have this, but it's like all the different songs, right? And the singing, like in the US, we don't sing, like we have chants, like we sing the national anthem and then we have chants, and all those chants tend to be pretty similar, across it. And I know that even in the UK and around the world, there's a lot of borrowing and sharing and stealing of melodies and tunes and things like that. But it really stuck out to me that, like, there are certain clubs have an unofficial song that the fans will sing, whether it's a pop song or whether it's just, related to the club itself. And maybe one season they decided to sing this or they heard the song and they had, a massive season. Now it's a tradition. And I thought, I was thinking, okay, like, yeah, to your point of just being together, but how often are you just singing together? Which it goes back to something like really kind of deep within within us as like humans, I think, of sharing that. And we don't really do that much anymore. Of course, you go to a concert, but the fact that it's at a non-musical type of venue, I think is really huge. And just really struck me of like, wow, yeah, not only are we not in person a lot, but singing and sharing in this act together, it speaks to some kind of like ritual that goes beyond just, the 3 points and the scoring, although that dictates a lot of it. It's just something that doesn't quite make sense logically, but it just does make sense like emotionally as people.
Totally. I've actually read an interesting theory about that aspect of English football, like the sing-songiness, which also applies to concerts. Because I've always noticed, I've seen the same artists in the US and in the UK, an English crowd is way better at singing back to a performer than a US crowd in like a very choral, connected way. And I think it also applies to football games. And the theory I read, I never really thought about it, but I read it online that everyone at school in England, like primary school, you have to sing like hymns. There's no separation between church and state, and it's not really a religious thing. You just sing. They're not really religious. It's like somewhere along the way, trying to be like one of the good example. But they're like childish songs. So you like sing
right
in assembly,
or we might call like nursery rhymes or kid songs. Yeah,
kind of like nursery rhymes, but it's like a pretty big part of like the primary school English education across the board. And I think that like just like wires you like for the rest of your life. So when you're in another situation, like at a football match or at a concert, you're kind of more in tune to singing back in a choral fashion, which I thought was a pretty interesting theory. I'm sure someone's read it.
Very interesting. Yeah. We always have like in the US schools, we had like chorus, but that was like a separate subject that you would do after a certain age, and yet you would sing, and then you have a choral concert and things, but it's not quite an everyday type of thing, which it sounds like it is in the UK. Yeah. Very, very cool. What would be one of those songs for Fulham then that maybe I'm not going to put you on the spot and make you sing it. You can just give us titles and we can link in the description.
It's not Ream obviously has the most iconic, which is just every time he does anything, everyone goes Ream.
That's a more American one too, where we've got a lot of those things, kind of the 1-2 syllables, not quite various verses and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, Metro's adopted the Will Griggs on 5, the Metro's on 5. Like, I think it's tough to like really see it as your own when you like taking it from another club. Right. I want to say that Fulham pioneered the Super Trooper ABBA football chant, which goes to the tune Super Trooper. It's like Harry Wilson, Mitchell, Neeskins, and it's like to the tune Super Trooper. Neeskins Cabano, this is. Which is also a great fun fact. They say in every film game, so I'm going to bore my parents as I listen to this. So they hate this fun fact. But Neeskins Cabano, named after Dutch midfielder Johan Neeskins, by his Congolese father. That's why he's called Neeskins. Super random.
I know. I was going to say, I don't think I was like Neeskins didn't play for Fulham though, right? But I know the other player.
Yeah, great player. So that's a good one. I mean, every player has their own charm. It's always nice to like you play again. I think Leno got maybe his first. I can't remember what she went to, but first chant this last weekend, as did Kenny Tete took a while to get a chant. Now he's like a firm favourite. So it's like there's like that first chant moment.
Okay, and as a player, you finally arrived. You finally made it. You finally have your song. Yeah, and there's nothing like that. I mean, I listen to a lot of interviews and podcasts with retired players, and it's like that's a type of thing like you will never really get again. Unless like I don't know. Do you watch Ted Lasso?
I actually haven't seen Ted Lasso. Well, I have seen Ted Lasso.
All right. Obviously, it has more of an American draw, but I would say still, I think the way it's done would still appeal to British audience as well. But like there was an episode where one of the main characters went back to his old club and got that, that kind of warm welcome again, and it kind of like, just the impact they had on him. There's just nothing quite like it. Again, to the point of song and everyone being together, it's really, really amazing. But yeah, hope to Craven Cottage is a stadium I've always wanted to visit. It always looked very unique. It still looks quite, if I would use the word, maybe like antique, or still very much like vintage, as opposed to how a lot of clubs have updated. So I know a family over here that just went and recently and loved the experience and thought it was great. So we'll hope to get over there at some point, to see that as well. I've only been to one game in the UK. That was at Vale Park for Port Vale. So that's my club that I support, but a family from that area originally. And found out recently too that I think my great-great-grandfather played for the Port Vale Reserves in like 1887 in a match or something like that. So that's pretty cool.
Extremely legit. That's more of a connection I have.
Very. So yeah, and to know that. So, but yeah, still a lot to experience. And then how about at least stateside? Like, I imagine you attend some MLS matches or college, or like, what was your experience of that? It's very different. We're very much, I think it's diverse because we have a lot of different cultures that pour into the game here. But I think in many, in some places they're closer to having a culture of their own as compared to others.
Yeah, I don't think I was lucky enough to go to any of the really good examples of soccer culture in the US. I went to a couple of MLS games at New York City FC, which is obviously not great. You're
in a baseball stadium. Yeah.
Wasn't it? I went to a bunch of games at Princeton, which was fun. You just get drunk with your friends and stand behind a goal and you kind of know the players, and that was fun. But the actual, especially like the play style was very very direct, but not in like the Tony Pulis lump into the big man direct. Like the lump into the very fit, fast forwards who's like just a lot of running and back and forth and not many chances on the whole. But that was fun. It was cool, like, be able to go to games so locally. I've actually never been to a Union game, which I think I would like to.
Got to fix that.
I think one of the better. But you got one of the better examples of fan culture in the US. I guess my experience is more like playing in like lower leagues. I was in lower leagues, the lowest of the lowest leagues in the US. That was mainly my experience, and I love that because there's a real. Every club is really, everyone who runs these clubs at the lowest league and lowest level, which is all of our clients, by the way, is just like really nice to work with. And I'm not just saying that because I work with Chris and these are our clients, but from like working with them, like a lot of our clients that I used to chat to as like a fellow captain, I used to go to the sideline, we used to text, and I think it's like because it's just so relatable because I literally did what they were doing.
You were that guy. Like you just self-described annoying client. Maybe the most annoying client.
So I get it. I get what they want to do. I get what they care about. I get what's annoying about running a team like that. And that's a good perspective to have on the Chris Happ. Also, it's just like it is really nice when you go to your major game on Sunday and your opposing captain is like the equivalent of you for another community somewhere else. I mean, there's a lot to
absolutely,
lots to draw upon.
I see that. I've played a lot of those leagues, and I've never taken up the mantle myself of being the guy to make sure you have 11. You've got an email list of 35, and somehow you still only get 9, 10, 11 every Sunday. I recognize, or collecting fees and all that. So I recognize that that's like a big sacrifice. So all the captains out there, we appreciate you. We see you. It's a very thankless job, but without you, nobody would get their act together at all. So we appreciate you. Cool, Jonny. Thank you so much for sitting down with us and giving your time here to Because Football. It's a great chat. Really enjoyed it. If people want to get in touch, if they're interested in Icarus or just would want to get in touch with you about anything for their clubs, like what's a good way to get in touch with you guys?
Honestly, if you just shoot us a DM on Instagram or Twitter, or if you want to email us, there's emails. We have a bunch of emails. My personal one is Jonny, JONNY, no H, 2 N's, at icarusfc.com. There's also emails on our website and on our Instagram as well. So
cool. I'll be sure to link.
Anything that's publicly available, you'll find us.
Cool. And I'll be sure to link all that in the description so everybody can find that and hopefully get themselves a nice personalized Icarus kit at some point for their local club or squad. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And
awesome. Thanks so much, Andrew. It's been a
we'll have
pleasure.
you again for sure.